Which actually brings us to one of the next subjects, which is the suggestibility. Once you start performing with this, you start noticing some people hallucinate within a couple of minutes. And other people, you're spending 10 minutes to get their arm to lift a couple of inches.
Sure.
So, what is your opinion on that? Is this simply a brain structure thing? Is it something that can be learned, influenced?
Well, again, this covers a good 100 years of kind of hypno history and academia. So, the state-based view has kind of suggested that, well, in fact, if we want to do research into hypnosis, we need to kind of find out if people are highs. That means essentially any suggestion you give them can take hold, or lows. They don't even respond to magnetic hands. Okay, and there's a bell curve, and most of us are in the middle. We've got kind of 15-20% of people are highs and 15-20% of people are lows, and it's like this. So we vary as subjects. Now, for many years, the way of kind of figuring that out, people were, when you're doing research, was you were given this, taken through 12 suggestions that are sometimes called the Stanford hypnotizability scale, which show us. And a big hero of mine on the cognitive behavioral side, Professor Irving Kirsch, after years of this being like the gold standard, just said, well, what's the baseline score? What do you get before the induction? He said this to Hilgard, one of the main researchers. Well, what do you mean? We're testing how hypnotizable they are. It's like, yeah, but if you just give them the suggestion, what score do they get? So they did that, and they found this fascinating but kind of painful fact that we essentially get the same score within 1 point out of 12. So this, for me, was like a body blow. It's kind of quite depressing at this point. It's like, well, what am I actually doing if I'm not doing a process that makes them more receptive to suggestion, highly receptive to ideas? These are the kind of definitions I used to use. But after this kind of dip, you realise, no, hang on a minute. A high is always a high then. They're always on.
Right.
That's why they got selected. That's why they ended up on stage. That's why they're hallucinating within 2 minutes, because a high is always a high. So first of all, subjects do vary. There's no doubt about it. The one piece of good news, I guess, and this is kind of the work of people like Barber and Lin and Gorosini, they came up with protocols that, again, they're not really made for the performer, but they came up with protocols where we could take lows and mediums and we could train them to be better subjects.
Right.
And they get better by, first of all, watching a video of someone being hypnotized and who's good at it. Then they watch the same video and there's a narration. That person is now narrating what they were actually experiencing. So they say things like, oh yeah, when you were talking about the balloons lifting my arm, it was strange because I was imagining a basketball inflating, but either way my arm was lifting. Now the person who's a low may hear that and think, oh well, I was just sitting and waiting.
Right.
So it's not they're resistant or incapable or don't have the special brain structure, because there is no real evidence for, there's no real evidence for a unique brain signature for the state of hypnosis, and secondly, there's no real evidence for a special brain structure, like you've got a bigger one of these and that makes you highly hypnotizable. It seems to cut across, even though there's tons of research trying to find the special brain or the special process.
Of course, yeah.
So we do vary as subjects. We can get better with training.
But this takes time.
But it takes a little bit of time. But you can kind of weave that into performance. You can hypnotize someone, you can ask them about it. You can kind of turn this protocol into your act. But the realities of performing, it kind of depends what it is you want to display. So, and I'm sure you'll kind of come on to this, but for me, what gives me comfort is knowing that the physical and emotional suggestions, between say 90 and sort of 75% of people can be pushed into that, into responding, and that response can be entertaining enough that I can call it my act.
Right.
If I walk up to a group of people on the street and I say, hey guys, and I play a couple of the classic kind of suggestion games, and I'm not feeling particularly inspired, and I'm not ready to push them any kind of further, you know, or I push it and it collapses. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't bother me. I know that I can make that stuff entertaining enough, especially in a close-up walk-around environment, or in a kind of parlour lecture type environment, that I can still arrive as a hypnotist and leave as a hypnotist, even if I'm dying inside. You know, I've still turned up and done something and played some mind games that were in the realm of real.
And especially if you're a mentalist or a magician, you can tie this into your card magic or mentalism.
Exactly, and I know, you know, I'm lucky enough to know many mentalists throughout the world, especially through Europe, and in Germany and Austria and a number of different places. I know people who have serious stage shows, and the centerpiece of one effect will involve someone having their hand stuck to a table. Right. And again, occasionally pure stage hypnotists will kind of criticise my work in that regard and say, you know, it's nothing but hand stick. It doesn't sound like they've paid that much attention to it, because I'm quite happy to go further than that. But as far as I'm concerned, our normal public out there, when they cannot move their hand from a table, they cannot say their name, there's a good opportunity for that to be a massively profound experience for them that they will remember 20 years from now. So yes, it rapidly becomes apparent, it doesn't take much more time, if any, that if they're good, then we just keep pushing with the suggestion. Right. But if you're starting out, then one of the best things to do is to recognise, you know, 80-90% of people are going to respond to the basics. The basics are entertaining enough, and the basics tell you whether you should push forward. When I started out in hypnosis, the first at least half a year, I usually just did a stiff arm and hand magnets, and that was it. And after a while, I started noticing it was good, and then you push it further. Connecting to that, I mean, hypnosis in itself is very entertaining. It's a very profound experience for people. But some of the avenues when you connect it to magic and mentalism, the way I see it, there's actually two ways. You can use it as a method and as a presentation. So can you give some examples of the ways you would apply this? I mean, there's a number of different ways. So I do a few effects. The effect could look like psychometry. The effect could look like a brief seance. There's, you know, I can kind of use hypnosis either as my selection procedure for those effects, or the hypnotism appears to be the method in the effect, or hypnotism is the method. So if it's method, sometimes I will have pre-showed someone with suggestion. I can plant a thought in someone's mind, or I can extract some information early on. I wouldn't want a stage show to be reliant on pre-show, to be honest, but it's a nice extra. If I'm at a gig, I will do that. I consult for many TV magicians. Hypnosis can be used as method. I can suggest that you can own things, that you believe certain things, that when you do a certain something, that this will be your experience. I can kind of stop and just freeze the action, so you go into like suspended animation, and then I can ring in something that will help, you know, and assist me in magic. So firstly, there's that. But for me, again, especially in a close-up kind of walk-around environment, I'm very fluid with it. So if I'm going to do a card effect that involves 3 people, I will begin by talking about the premise for what it is I'm doing. Normally, I don't really present myself as a mind reader. I suggest, you know, that I'm more like a mind writer. I can kind of push you in certain directions and encourage you to make certain decisions that will feel like they absolutely come from you, because they do. I'm more comfortable with that presentation. So if I then need to, you know, use what I call the set piece exercises to find people suitable for a cast iron card effect or whatever else it's going to be, then it has some plausibility as process. Equally, I may use magical effects to find people who I know I'm going to hypnotize. I know I'm going to lead from that into an amnesia effect, and I need to have kind of softly tested someone to find out if I think they can do amnesia. So I kind of mix it up. Sometimes it's method, sometimes it's that I'm filtering and selecting you, but I don't want to present it as a hypnotic selection procedure. I'm just giving you an experience and I'm identifying who's going to be good.
Which is a very subtle way of testing without any evident failure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're fluid about it, if you're not kind of dead set on it must be invisibility or it's not, good enough. If you get a bit more relaxed about it, a bit more fluid about it, it's very easy. I mean, and once you get over the concept of trance and sleep and then being under and in a special state, then you still have the luxury of presenting it in that way. But again, I think early on, magicians are often so used to things working and being guaranteed and all that kind of stuff, that straying into the what if they just look at me, what if they just open their eyes, what if they don't go into a trance, what if they come out of it, is part of the issue with that particular presentation. And once you relax about that, you can almost just instruct the person in there.
So I can imagine for someone who hasn't ever tried hypnosis, this seems kind of far away and kind of hard to imagine. So what would you suggest as a starting point for learning hypnosis?
Well, I have a book. I'm happy to plug that book. But my book is like very world renowned for getting people started with hypnosis. And when I started, I had a book this thick, the Encyclopedia of Stage Hypnosis. It is all in that book, but you kind of can't see the wood for the trees. Yeah. You can't. Yeah, it's like which bit's important. My book's 108 pages or something like that, called Reality is Plastic, and it helps people get started. But putting that aside, they could pick up any book, or they could watch a video and they could mimic a process. The point is, the basics, stuff that you could learn in an hour or two if you were actually applied and kind of focused on it and didn't need to get it perfect. The basics are of the most value. This is where the good stuff is. The more of it you learn, like anything else, the more of the kind of complicated advanced stuff you put down. Right. And you realize it's really anything that you suggest will cause hypnosis, however esoteric it is, however dry and kind of cognitive it is in presentation, anything you suggest will cause this. So that's good news for the beginner. Yeah. It's one of those things where, like most things in life, I guess, it is a bit of a feel thing. Yeah. You have to. So when I'm training people, the emphasis really is on, we just take a few techniques from each part of the process and we use them over and over again. I'm a big believer in, same with magic itself, is rather than learning the 1,000 tricks, get the 6 tricks and do them over and over again. Not just because that's what professionals do, but because those 6 effects, or in hypnosis, those 2 inductions, are going to tell you and teach you everything you need to know about the subject. It's all hidden. Like in martial arts, sometimes they have their little sequences, there's a certain number of moves, and the system is kind of hidden within these moves. And if you just keep letting that kind of turn in the light, it will give up more and more of itself. So you get the objections, and you get the bits of good fortune, and you get the surprises, and that teaches you everything you need to know. So my main advice is just kind of begin, like today.
Take some of the basic techniques.
Just begin, and take the pressure off yourself. Don't call it hypnosis at first. Just say, let me show you this body trick. I'm going to show you a little mind game, this concentration exercise. And it's like kid stuff, but don't write off the basics as just being kid stuff, even though a kid could do it and you may have done it in the playground and it's like being in drama or a Tai Chi class or whatever. That is where the gold is, and you don't know it yet. But if you do the basics and you get someone to a challenge suggestion, then you are like 1 sentence away from that person hallucinating. And in any other context, that is miraculous. If you were to rub a lamp and then boom, you would make yourself invisible, that would be quite a good trick. You can do that with even saying the word basics is creating this false dichotomy. But the simple stuff, the stuff that's hundreds, the essentials that seem like building blocks, actually you suddenly realise I only need 4 or 5 of these blocks, and I can kind of get anything going. So rather than, you know, where I didn't get lost there, but I spent a lot of time, because I got into it via this kind of Ericksonian hypnotherapy and NLP, and there was a large emphasis on studying language and language patterns and learning to speak in a special hypnotic way. Actually, the only language pattern that is of that is of real value and a kind of it's just going to help you. It's like the oil that makes it all work, is pacing and leading.
Right.
And I have a kind of 10-12 minute video just about that you could find if you search my name in pacing and leading.
Link that in the description.
Once you get that down, it means you can start wherever. So you're sitting there, you can feel your hand on your leg, you're listening to me, and you're probably wondering, you know, is he really going to try and hypnotise me as we sit here in the middle? So you can begin, you can start talking. When something starts to happen, that's right, you can feel that hand starting to lift. I don't know. You know, if something's not happening, then you can pace that. You know, so pacing and leading is like a key skill, but the rest of the time, just speak in a way that can be understood, that a child can understand, anyone can understand, provoke their imagination. I'll just say one more thing that I think is of value. Every single technique of mine, every single thing I'm doing has 3 ingredients. One ingredient is I give you instructions to do things. Put your feet here, put your arms out, look at me. The second ingredient is I give you instructions to imagine things. One of those things is the outcome, your hand's going to touch your head. One of them is the means, it's going to lift up as if there's balloons attached. And the third and key ingredient that's going to make this hypnosis, rather than just following instructions, is suggestion. A suggestion is going to contain a hint or a cue that you will experience this as if it's happening. So in other words, look at your fingers and they will move together and touch. In a moment, one of your hands is going to lift. I don't know if it will be your left hand or your right hand. There it goes. You know. So there's always a cue that provokes the classic suggestion effect, that it's happening rather than something you're doing. So if those 3 things, you can kind of start to just create your own techniques, if you like, or rather than thinking, I haven't learnt the script for magnetic hands or a stiff arm or a handshake induction or arm levitation, instead just begin. You can feel that hand resting there. You can notice the texture of your jeans, and in a moment. So you just keep coming back to it and trying to kind of dig into it until something happens, and then you fold that back into the recipe. That's right, fingers twitching. And we just keep spinning this wheel until the responses are clearly automatic.
Right.